Everyone clicked on Jude, right? On her picture.
Yes, we're recording. Hello, and welcome to the Empowerment versus Care debate. Our scenario stated that the pursuit of self-sufficiency and independence is highly valued in our society and is reflected in many legislative laws and funding initiatives associated with the individuals with disabilities. Despite such efforts, research findings support the fact that individuals with disabilities are not afforded the same opportunities as those without disabilities in determining their post-school choices and outcomes. Instead, people with disabilities, especially those with severe disabilities, find themselves trapped in a system of care where their post-school choices are determined by others because of barriers related to attitudes, funding, rehabilitation, and healthcare. On the other side, service providers are concerned with issues related to liability and service provision. We are now going to meet the debaters. I am Gabrielle Scragg, and I am the stater for the empowerment side.
I'm Jude Gullion. I'm the stater for the care side.
I'm Kristen Stahl, and I'm the prover for the empowerment side.
I am Marcella Sandoval, and I am the prover for the care side.
I am Paula Ward, and I am the attacker for the empowerment side. And again, my name's Paula Ward, and I am the attacker for the care side as well.
I'm now going to talk about why empowering individuals with disabilities to make their own choices and decisions in regards to post-school activities is more ethical than service providers making those choices for them. Before I begin, I'm going to go over some key terms that are relevant to the empowerment side of the debate. The first term is empowerment. Empowerment is the power, right, or authority to perform various acts or duties. The next term is quality of life, which is a critical measure of treatment outcome for people with mental and physical health concerns. Next is self-determination theory. This theory maintains that an understanding of human motivation requires a consideration of innate psychological needs for competence, autonomy, and relatedness. I will now go over terms relevant to self-determination theory. The first one is competence. Competence is the quality or state of having sufficient knowledge, judgment, skill, or strength as for a particular duty or in a particular respect. Next is autonomy, which is the quality or state of being self-governing. Last is relatedness. Relatedness can be defined as connected by reason of an established or discoverable relation. I will now go over key points in research that highlight why empowering individuals with disabilities is a more ethical option. First, according to Martinez and Wright, taking away the basic human right of making life choices has a negative impact on one's physical and mental health. Also, according to Burgess and Gutstein, having the option to make choices and having opportunities for independence enhance an individual's quality of life. Martinez also says that individuals with disabilities that have self-determination are more likely to have greater independence, employment, and quality of life. Sjogren, Waymeyer, Palmer, Refinbark, and Little found that individuals with disabilities that have high self-determination have greater community access and employment than individuals that have a lower self-determination. I will now reference the core ethical principles in the Behavior Analyst Certification Board's ethical compliance codes to build the case for empowerment. The 9 core ethical principles require that we respect individuals' autonomy and dignity. The ethical principles also require that we are just when we deliver treatment to an individual. Many of the Behavior Analyst Certification Board's ethical compliance codes support and require the empowerment of individuals with disabilities. To summarize the empowerment side of the debate, I would like to say that the Behavior Analyst Certification Board has a number of professional and ethical compliance codes that require the behavior analyst to empower their client and involve them in the planning consent to their own programming. While individuals with disabilities may not be as proficient in independent skills as their neurotypical peers, empowering them to make their own choices in regards to post-school activities remains the more beneficial and ethical option than service providers making those choices for them. I will now hand it over to Jude, who is the care stater.
Thank you, Gabrielle. I will discuss the care side of the debate. The care key terms. Effective care refers to the delivery of care or services that show evidence or reduced risks of relevant and important clinical outcomes, such as disease or injury. Ethics of care may be summarized by the following 6 features. Benefice is the attempt to do good by acting in the best interest of the individual. Non-malfeasance is avoiding and reducing harm to the individual and their family. Respect means respecting the autonomy, individuality, and confidentiality. Integrity is acting honestly when reporting on and assisting individuals. Compliance refers to the imperative to work within legal and ethical boundaries. And competence refers to operating within one's scope to assist others. Protective guidance is guiding individuals to make choices when they have potential to make harmful treatment decisions contrary to their best interests. The care key points. The idea behind the care model is that individuals who have intellectual disabilities or who have other unique situations may not be able to properly care for themselves, and we do not want to see them go without that needed care. So some of the care key points are supported decision making, and that is the process where individuals with disabilities use trusted family, friends, and professionals to make important decisions they would otherwise be unable to make alone. The individual makes all the final decisions regarding service, provider, and key elements. The authorization may be revoked by the individual at any time. Another important key point is guardianship. A legal appointment made by a judge where an individual's loved one or court-appointed designee makes legal decisions for a person who is deemed incapable of doing so. And guardianship may be partial for specific areas like financial or medical, where the individual still retains some rights in other areas. Full guardianship is appointed when individuals are deemed incapable of making any decisions. And guardianship can be restored, but typically that does not happen. It is a lifelong arrangement. An example of someone who has guardianship might be a medical guardianship for someone who has power of attorney. That might be short term, like when someone goes into the hospital, they may choose to make their spouse their power of attorney. Someone with a serious medical disability, however, should have a medical guardian in place at all times in case they have an emergency. For an example, an adult living with an active seizure disorder should have a designated person to make decisions in the event that they are unable to make choices for themselves or they do not have the capability to understand their decisions. This would really come into play if an individual who is experiencing a bipolar swing decides that they don't want to take their medication that day despite having active seizures. Or an adult with autism feels overwhelmed by hospitals, so they refuse to get in an ambulance, even though maybe they broke their foot. A guardian can be a parent or a relative, but it can also be court appointed if they don't have someone from their family who can do that for them. This is often necessary in situations where an individual has moderate to severe intellectual disability and does not possess the cognitive abilities to make choices about living arrangements, medical services, or finances. There are several disadvantages to giving up one's legal rights, however. The person may no longer vote, own a weapon, or serve in the military. The care model emphasizes the support of loved ones and service providers. Adults transitioning from the public school to adult age services should make all their decisions that they are capable of making. However, it is often not possible for adults living with autism who have lower cognitive function. The loved ones and guardians and service providers should always work diligently to include the individual in the decision-making process whenever possible. One of the big issues about individuals living alone is health concerns. According to the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, a lot of comorbidities that occur are epilepsy and seizures, sleep disorders and disturbances, ADHD, gastrointestinal disorders, feeding and eating challenges, obesity, anxiety, depression, and bipolar disorder. There are also a higher rate of chromosomal disorders associated with autism, including Down syndrome, Fragile X, tuberous sclerosis, and others. And a study by the CDC from 2018 shows that in a group of 16,000 youth with ASD, 35% had an intellectual disability of under 70, while 25% were considered to be on the borderline range between 71 and 85. And that leaves 44% remaining with average or above intelligence, IQ. Eva Feder-Kate quoted, "Yet despite the achievement of the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, itself and the opportunities it has opened, I believe there is much that is problematic in the approach that extols independence as the route to a dignified life and sees dependence as a degeneration of the person. I worry that the emphasis on independence extols an adulation that is a mere fiction, not only for people with disability, but for all of us. The emphasis on choice leaves out many people with disabilities for whom making choices is problematic, as their cognitive function may be seriously impaired. And the degeneration of care and dependency tends toward an attitude that makes the work and value of carers invisible, thus creating one oppression in the effort to alleviate the other." The care model comes into play where the ability to make choices stops. The reality is that many adults who remain in adult disability services need guidance. Supported decision-making is the process where we put the individual's needs and interests first to assist them in having a happy and healthy life as much as possible. And a quality of life questionnaire given to 75 individuals with high functioning ASD and 28 typically developing young adults, ages 18 to 28, were surveyed. The quality of life questionnaire measured different facets of what it takes to have an independent, happy life. The study determined that satisfaction, empowerment, and independence, and social belonging, community, and integration were the most important. Even the individuals with high-functioning autism who were used in this study still lack significantly in these three areas compared to their same-age peers. Participants noted that anxiety, daily executive functioning, and emotional processing were their biggest barriers to leading what they considered independent and happy lives. As you can see, there is a clear breakdown in even the ability for individuals with high-functioning autism to manage their own lives without any help. Medication management, transportation, living arrangements, paying rent and utilities, groceries and nutrition, receiving and managing disability services, safety awareness, and more are all issues that adults with autism may struggle with. This is especially true for those with moderate to severe intellectual disabilities. The care model is highly suggested for those individuals who need guidance in making important day-to-day and long-term choices. Next, we will hear from Kristen on the research supporting the empowerment side of the debate.
Hi, my name is Kristen, and I will be going over a lot of the research that we have come into contact with that supports the empowerment side. The first research that we found was a famous and groundbreaking experiment in the late 1970s, and it indicated just how powerful the positive effects of control over one's life and the negative effects of lack of such control can be. Elderly residents in a nursing home rated as providing very good care overall were divided into two groups. In one group, the staff emphasized their ability to make choices and control over their own environment. Each of these residents was given a plant to take care of, and in the other group, the staff emphasized that they would take care of all the residents' needs. The residents were given a plant which the staff took care of. In the control group, where the staff took care of the plant and the residents did not have decisions regarding the plant, 71% were rated as having become more debilitated over a period of time as short as 3 weeks. In contrast with this group, the decision-making group that got to make choices for taking care of their plant, 93% of the people who were encouraged to make decisions for themselves, given decisions to make, and given responsibilities for something outside of themselves, actually showed overall improvement. They became more active and felt happier. And Wright states in regards to this, that so weak a manipulation had any effect suggests how important increased control is for these people, for whom decision-making is virtually non-existent. The next body of research that we came into contact with regards quality of life for these individuals. And Vertigo in 2005 states, generally agreed upon domains of adult quality of life are interpersonal relationships, social inclusion, personal development, physical well-being, rights, environment, family, recreation and leisure, and safety and security. In their longitudinal study of 48 children diagnosed with autism, McGovern and Sigmund, 2005, found that it was not IQ that predicted better functioning, but the quality of emotional engagement with peers. Their study, among others, has neither supported the common assumption that IQ is related to good outcome, nor that IQ is a predictor of quality of life. The next research that we came in contact with was from Martinez in 2015, and I quote, "As research has consistently shown, people with disabilities who are encouraged and supported to make their own decisions to act as primary causal agents are better employed at higher salaries and more independent. Accessed and used appropriately, VR supports and services focused on employment-based self-determination and independent living skills can empower young adults with disabilities to protect and exercise their right to make choices, helping them become poised and prepared to lead full and independent lives, free from overbroad and undue guardianship. These findings suggest that self-determination status upon exiting high school predicts positive outcomes in the domains of achieving employment and community access 1 year post-school, and that exposure to self-determination interventions in secondary school may lead to more stability in student outcomes over time." I will now review the core ethical principles that support the empowerment aspect of this argument. The first core ethical principle is respect autonomy, and it states, "Individuals have the right to decide how to live their lives as long as their actions do not interfere with the rights and welfare of others. Respect for autonomy is accepted by mental health professionals because the underlying goal of psychotherapy and counseling is often to move those with whom we work with toward a greater self-reliance and self-determination." And this is from Kuchar and Kiefspiegel, 1990. Another core ethical principle for empowerment is accord dignity. And it states, "Mental health professionals should view those with whom we work as worthy of respect. We must strive to understand cultural and other ways that people differ from ourselves, and to eliminate biases that might have an impact on the quality of our work." This is also Kuchar and Kiefspiegel, 1990, the writers of the core ethical principles. And this comes into effect with guardians making decisions for individuals with disabilities that might be more based on their own biases in regards to gender identity, sexuality, religious beliefs, moral values, and other broad range of aspects of the individual's lives that could have a detrimental effect on their quality of life if they do not have a say in it themselves. I will now review some of the BACB professional and ethical compliance codes for behavior analysts that support the empowerment argument. Code 2.04D, third-party involvement in services, states, Behavior analysts put the client's care above all others, and should the third party make requirements for services that are contraindicated by the behavior analyst's recommendations, behavior analysts are obligated to research such conflicts in the best interest of the client. If said conflict cannot be resolved, that behavior analyst's services to a client may be discontinued following appropriate transition. The next code I'll discuss is Code 3.03, Behavior Analytic Assessment Consent. And it states, prior to conducting an assessment, behavior analysts must explain to the client the procedures to be used, who will participate, and how the resulting information will be used. Behavior analysts must obtain the client's written approval of the assessment procedures before implementing them. Ethical Code 4.02, involving clients in planning and consent, states that behavior analysts involve the client in planning of and consent for behavior change programs. And last, I will discuss the legal statute on consent, since the BACB codes both refer to consent. And it states, to give consent, a person should be able to understand the facts and consequences relative to a decision and manifest that decision voluntarily. Thus, it is a decision one makes for oneself. Furthermore, to give consent, a person must be considered competent and be the legal age of 18. Permission is a proxy consent wherein a parent or guardian acts in the best interest of their child or ward by making decisions on their behalf. Kucher and Keith Spiegel, 1990. And next, I will turn the discussion over to my colleague Marcella, who is the approver for the care side.
Thank you, Kristen. Hi, my name is Marcella Sandoval. I will be discussing research supporting care side for individuals with intellectual disabilities. The article by Kate, 2011, discusses an individual's autonomy or their right to make their own decisions, particularly in the case of individuals with intellectual disabilities. In order for autonomy to be possible over one's own life, an individual must be able to care for oneself. If this is not an attainable goal and must still rely on others, then they do not possess the ability and they lack autonomy. That is where support for the individual is necessary, as they are unable to make the necessary decisions over their own life. As Kate mentions in the article, when individuals find themselves dependent on others for self-care, economic security, and safety, the dignity that comes with autonomy appears threatened. Most individuals with disabilities lack the necessary executive functions such as self-monitoring, sustaining attention skills, organizing, or planning skills that are necessary for self-management. Most individuals with intellectual disabilities lack the skill which holds them back from sustaining an independent living situation with little to no support from others. As stated in Williams and Porter 2017 citation, these ideas of interdependence resonate with definitions put forward by the disabled people's movement, which frame autonomy as a matter of control rather than simply as isolated independence. In order for one to have autonomy over their lives, they must be able to not only make their own decisions, but also sustain an independent way of living. Although there are individuals with intellectual disabilities whom are capable of higher quality of life, they are still in need of support and programs accessible to them in order to attain such support. As stated in Post et al. 2013, those caring for the people along the autism are challenged to find the right balance between respecting the experience of a loved one with autism on its own terms, as it presents itself in trying to encourage a loved one to achieve certain thresholds of social, emotional, and intellectual competence. Although individuals caring for those with disabilities attempt to encourage independence and autonomy, there is still a need to assist those individuals in making the correct decisions that will ultimately be beneficial to them. Next, I will be reviewing the ethical code for the BACB professional and ethical compliance codes for behavior analysts, which support the care side. Ethical code 2.03A on consultation. Behavior analysts arrange for appropriate consultations and are referrals based principally on the best interest of their clients. with appropriate consent and subject to other relevant considerations, including applicable law and contractual obligations, as stated in the Board Analyst Certification Board 2016. Another ethical code that backs the client care side is Ethical Code 4.03a, Individualized Behavior Change Programs. Behavior analysts must tailor behavior change programs to the unique behaviors, environmental variables, assessment results, and goals of each client. Now I will be discussing the legal statutes on incompetency regarding client care. The article by Quinn et al. 2005 states that legally you are either competent or not, meaning if there is even a slight belief of incompetence, one is considered unable to not do much of anything. It is important for those that are unable to sustain themselves to have someone there to advocate for them and assist in making the best choices for them. As stated in the article by Quinn et al. 2005, guardianship need not be an all or nothing. Why not limit the power of guardian in accordance with the specific needs of the persons with diminished capacity? And now I will hand it over to Paula, who will be attacking both the empowerment and care side.
Thank you, Marcella. Our care colleague cited Freeman's 2013 article. Friedman makes a good case for the imbalance of power as it pertains to the lack of supports and services to enable empowerment, which can bolster the argument for the need of the care model. However, the care model will only uphold the status quo on the lack of services without any effect for real change. The more we empower our youth, the more they can advocate for the services they individually need and to seek out their social networks. This in turn can create more social awareness and social validity for more resources. Leonard in 2016 found that although there is a gap between the best practice of empowerment and real-world societal structures, necessity for empowering transitioning youth to promote positive outcomes is paramount. As you can see in this slide, in 2017, the United States Government Accountability Office, in order to support societal demands for empowerment and least restrictive environments, recommends that federal agencies should take further action to fund and promote the programs found in Table 1. If the medical or care model were still being promoted on the federal level, only a fraction of these programs would be considered for funding. Some providers and researchers, such as Katay's 2011 study, advocate for the care model because, and I quote, "It is a vision of society that it can account for the inevitable dependency relationships between unequals." However, Katay's views and the care model itself can be construed as ableist. It looks more at what is wrong with an individual than really understanding what that individual may need or want. Yes, dependence on others may be necessary at times, but we must get rid of the notion that dependence precludes agency. Well-being intertwines with self-determination with or without a need for specialized services or support. To demonstrate this, Ho and Eves in 2008 found that 60% within their study of young adults with ASD, that the participants had better outcomes in correlation to higher percentages of self-agency. As cited by the care side, the 2017 Williams and Porter paper argued that choice and control within the empowerment movement had been modeled on a widespread consumerist model of choice, as if choice is a novel concept derived from capitalism. They further proclaim that this can be a bewildering and time-consuming to those with intellectual abilities. Yet Williams and Porter's own findings do not support their hypothesis. Participants that were members of self-advocacy groups, which, by the way, are based on the social model of empowerment and choice, had less anxiety about self-identity and had more confidence to seek changes in the structures around them. Furthermore, Williams and Porter use a definition of choice that is hugely flawed. Participants that were members of use a definition of choice that is hugely flawed. In 1979, Brigham, a well-respected behaviorist, defined choice as the opportunity to make an uncoerced selection from two or more alternative events, consequences, or responses. By uncoerced, we mean that there are no programmed implicit or explicit consequences for selecting one alternative over the others, except for the characteristics of the alternatives themselves. Choice is being free from coercion. That is a definition that is better suited to this debate. My colleague on the care side also cited Kim's 2019 study to support their position. However, Kim's study does not support the care position at all. In fact, the researchers' finding concluded that self-determination underlies the participants' ability to enhance their social participation and learning, to actively pursue valued employment, to develop positive self-identities, to seek appropriate health care services, to create stable social environments, and to engage in personal development. Another questionable defense for the care position is the Stony Brook Guidelines. Some questions have been raised about post-2012 findings in the Stony Brook Guidelines. Milton, in 2014, noted that the guidelines were written without any direct input from those who have autism, and that the guidelines were written solely within the medical model. The guidelines themselves may be unethical because the writing of them was not truly participatory or representative of the ASD community as a whole. My teammate Kirsten made a strong defense for empowerment by highlighting the core principles and ethical codes that pertain to this issue. Many of the behavioral analytic ethical codes relating to client treatment and rights have roots that trace back to the seminal court case of Wyatt versus Stickney, as well as all the research studies concerning the importance of self-autonomy and choice that have come since Wyatt versus Stickney. Laws inspired by Wyatt helped establish civil rights for the disabled. Such rights include the right to treatment and the right to refuse treatment. Beyond that, the Wyatt mandate of the right to treatment in the least restrictive environment is echoed in the Americans with Disabilities Act. And as you can see on the slide, other laws that came from Wyatt versus Stickney include the Patient Bill of Rights, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, the Mental Health Systems Act, Protection and Advocacy of Individuals with Mental Illness Act, and the Development Disabilities Assistance and Bills of Rights Act. This concludes the counter to care. I will now counter the empowerment side. The empowerment team made a sound argument and provided a robust conceptual model to advocate self-autonomy for those with disabilities with the Martinez study. However, a closer examination reveals very little empirical support. Furthermore, the primary research cited by the opposing team to support the significant negative impact of the loss of autonomy and lack of empowerment are similar literature reviews. For example, Salzman's 2010 article and Wright's 2010 paper offer limited quantitative or qualitative data. Broadening the investigation of the research literature creates a horn of studies that rely heavily on case law, hypothesis, or antiquated research. An illustration, Wright's 2010 study presents one qualitative research paper and two quantitative studies from 4 decades prior in order to support the efficacy of autonomy. This is problematic when trying to establish subjective well-being and the necessity of empowerment to the current issues of today. Additionally, the opposing team noted that IQ is not a predictor of quality of life, which is true, and the various domains of quality of life were also commented upon. However, what is not remarked upon was how these components interact with one another. Changes in one domain can induce changes in another domain for better or worse. While empowerment and consent, choice, and individualism are important domains for quality of life, they are still only subdomains. If basic needs are not being met, that directly impacts all the domains of life, such as physical well-being, material well-being, and social well-being. Petrie and fellow researchers in 2005 found that individuals with profound disabilities, in order to gratify their needs on several domains of quality of life, needed a secure relationship with a sensitive, responsive parent and direct support staff to make decisions on their behalf. Additionally, quality of life has both etic and emic properties. That is to say, while there is a general theoretical consensus that the quality of life domains in all of its dimensions are generally represented within all populations, the significance that is attached to the domains differ for different groups of people, based on their own experiences and frame of reference. For example, Claes in 2010 and Boyd in 2009 established that those with profound needs have reported that the lack of caregivers and adequate supports to address basic physical and material needs has more impact on the quality of life than self-determination. An example of this would be a 1998 case study from England. I'll wait for the slide. Thank you. An example of this would be a 1998 case study from England provided by Crichton. In this study, as you can see on the slide, an elderly man who is severely disabled chooses not to eat and risks losing his place in a group home and being sent back to a more restrictive environment where he may have been sexually assaulted. This is where the right to treatment and the right to personal liberties becomes conflicted. The patient in this case study will lose his right to the least restrictive environment by his right to make the bad choice to not eat. How is this effective treatment? Other members of society may have the right to choose not to eat lunch, but they typically have the skill set to meet the contingencies to sustain their own life. Another point not well made by the opposing team is that when evaluating self-determination and choice-making, one must ask if it provides real and meaningful options. Colin, in 1999, suggests that individuals with disabilities make few or real meaningful choices in their lives. If choice interventions are providing alternatives, or if choices are options of which none are highly preferred, then choice-making opportunities may have no real meaning for that individual. Therefore, they are not being truly self-determinate or being empowered. The empowerment attacker brought up Wyatt versus Stickney. This law case revolves around the right to rehabilitation, and not at one point was there mention on the empowerment side how funding for such programs is dependent on teaching independent living skills. Yet what happens when a client chooses to play on their iPad rather than learning the necessary skills to live as independently as possible? What if they tried to use Nubbin without having been taught how? Do they understand the consequences of their behavior? Are they competent? According to Kucher and Keith Spiegel, 1990, de facto competency for children under 18 and incompetency for adults over 18 legally revolves around the psychological aspects of comprehension, assertiveness and autonomy, rational reasoning, anticipation of future events, and judgments in the face of uncertainty or contingency, which become the following four basic premises. These four premises include the person's ability to understand the information that is offered about the nature and potential consequences of the decision to be made, the ability to manifest a decision, the manner in which the decision is made, and the nature of the resulting decision. For those who are incompetent, in order to maintain the least restrictive environment and to foster independence, amending their personal rights may be appropriate and absolutely necessary. I thank you for listening, and this now concludes the counter to empowerment. Thank you.
I'm now going to wrap up the empowerment side of the debate by pointing out the arguments that the care side was not able to counter. First, the BACB ethical codes. A number of the BACB ethical codes address the issue of empowerment. These codes require the individual to be involved in the planning of their own treatment as well as consent to it. According to the codes, we are required to empower individuals in a variety of ways when the opportunities present themselves. The other arguments that the care side was not able to counter was the argument that the ethical principles support empowerment. Specifically, the ethical principles accord dignity and respect autonomy. Both support the empowerment of individuals with disabilities. So to conclude the debate, while the care side did an excellent job countering some of the points that were previously made, we stand by the stance that empowering individuals with disabilities to make their own choices is the more ethical option. This belief is based on the BACB ethical codes and the ethical principles. These codes and principles support and require the empowerment of individuals with disabilities, and based on these codes and principles, to provide them with anything less would be unethical. Thanks for listening. You can now see our references for our debate. We look forward to your questions and comments.